Am I making sense of what I think I heard you said there?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is an iconic psychology theory. And what he basically said is that at the base of the pyramid, we have physiological needs that need to be met. We need to sleep, we need to eat, we need to have water. And then those are partially met, you go up the pyramid. And at the top of the pyramid of the 5 levels he has is this thing called self-actualization, which is like being all you can be. Well, what's at the base of the pyramid in life is the tangible things. So you can put your head on your pillow when you go to sleep at night and say, did I have 3 meals today? And you can say, yeah, I did. And am I hungry going to bed? No, I'm not. But so the tangibles in life are easy to measure, and they're important. If you don't get those met, obviously you become homeless. And but in some ways, the things that most give you value in life, the things that most give you memories or differentiate your life so it feels like it's worthwhile, are not what you ate for lunch today. And so when you go to bed and put your head on your pillow, you could ask yourself, was I self-actualized today? Meaning, was I being all I could be? That's a much harder question to answer. So in essence, what's at the base of the pyramid is tangible. What's valuable at the peak of the pyramid is intangible. And what I think organizations, companies, I'll just speak to businesses right now, what businesses have to get better at is like figuring out how do you value the intangibles in a business, which is generally where the loyalty happens, the loyalty of your customers, or the memories with your best friends don't happen because you had an amazing lunch together. It happened because you went on some hike and saw this phenomenal view that you wouldn't have seen with your best friends. So I guess the bottom line here is recognizing that, especially in the business world, that what's the easiest thing to measure is the stuff that's the tangible in life, but it's not what actually differentiates a company
or adds the value to the product or the service.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. The components of artificial intelligence, machine learning, additive manufacturing, all of those things as well. I have conversations. I always talk to the Uber drivers about, how long do you think you're going to be doing this before your car's driving itself? And I read somewhere, someone said to me that the artists will one day once again be revered in society when all the menial tasks and manual labor, or lots of it, is handled by machines and computers. The artists, the creatives, they will once again be more valued than anybody in society.
I think the indicator of that is Burning Man.
Yeah, right.
Burning Man Festival, which is, as Brian Chesky, the CEO of Airbnb, said to me when he went out to Burning Man the first year. I was working with the company. I've been on the board of the festival for 10 years, and Brian said to me, God, this place is like what the world would be like if artists ruled the world. And it is true. It's like it's a big artist, festival. So I think actually a couple things. I think as we get more technology dependent, as machine learning and artificial intelligence and robots take over, what will actually become more valuable is what's scarce. What's scarce is artistry, creativity, intuition, human emotional intelligence.
Love,
all of these things that actually, robots and machines can't give us. So in some ways, what it says is double down on becoming a better human, because actually in a world where those human qualities become more valuable, you will have more to offer.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
Double down on being a better human, because it ultimately will be better for you and everybody else. Well, those are wise words.
Yes.
And they make sense, man. Wow. So to kind of swing this back to the Baja topic, again, I heard you speak on Tim Ferriss, and then all of a sudden you're talking about Baja, which is just such a small place in this great big world, but it's such a special place. You have a do you call it a business, or what do you call the Elder Academy?
It's a social enterprise. It's like a nonprofit.
Okay.
So I built a campus. It's like calling it a campus is sort of glorifying it, but it's 8 pieces of property, 4 pieces of land, 4 homes that are right there on the coast in southern Pescadero, which is near Todos Santos, about 45 minutes to an hour north of Cabo San Lucas.
Right.
And it's a nonprofit or a social enterprise in the sense that 50 to 60% of the people who we have in the program are on some kind of scholarship we give them. And it's called the Modern Elder Academy. It's the world's first midlife wisdom school. We've had 500 people go through the program from 17 countries so far. And it's a 1-week program where people come and sort of reimagine how to repurpose themselves. Average age is about 52. So you're right about there, average age is 52, but we've had people from as young as 30 and as old as 78 come. The reason people tend to come is they're in some kind of midlife transition, whether it's deciding.
I like that you use the word transition and not crisis.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, there are crises that we have in
Sure.
midlife, but most people have transitions more than crises. And a transition could be everything from I want to change my career, or I lost my job. I want to start a business. I'm getting divorced. My kids are moving out of the home, and I'm going to be an empty nester. I'm going through menopause. My parents just passed away. I have just gotten a diagnosis of a disease, which happens as you get older. These are some of the kinds of things that people maybe consider a transition. And, or I want to take a gap year. I've saved up enough money and I can take a year off. And I sort of want to have this academy, the week-long academy program be the thing that kicks off my thinking.
Springboard, yeah.
Yeah. How do I look at how I want to live my life differently? Here's an interesting exercise. I was going scuba diving with my dad a year and a half ago. And my dad at the time, my dad's 82 now. He was 80 then. And I was 57 then. I'm 58 now, turned 59 later this month. So my dad started scuba diving when he was 60. And in the next 20 years or so, he did 2,700 scuba dives.
Wow.
So he was just like obsessed with it, just doing it all over the world even. And so he and I went to not Bali, but we were in one of the Indonesian islands. And so before I went out scuba diving with my dad that morning, I went to an online longevity site and took one of those tests where I put all my data in and asked like, okay, how long am I going to live? And the website came back and said, you're going to probably live till maybe age 98. Wow, that's interesting. I was like, wow, that's a long time. So I went downstairs, was getting on the boat with my dad, and I said, Dad, I didn't tell him, about the test. I said, Dad, how long are you going to live? And he said, I'm going to live till 98. I said, well, that's interesting. Same age as me. And so we did the math, and we realized that my dad at age 80 at that time was barely into the 4th quarter of his adult life, if you start counting your adult years at age 18. So in essence, if he lived till 98, he was barely into the 4th quarter. Like sometimes the 4th quarter of a football game or a basketball game or the last, act of a play is the best part. So it's like, well, that's interesting. And then we said, well, Chip, I'm 57. I have 39 years of adulthood behind me. I have 41 years of adulthood ahead of me. I'm not even at halftime.
Yeah.
So when you think that way, when you start doing the math on how much of your adult life is still ahead of you, you actually start to think about, wow, I have a lot of life ahead of me. So I can learn Spanish, or I can learn to surf, or I can start learning to scuba dive, or whatever it is. Whereas for a lot of people after about age 45 or 50, they start narrowing their life. And this is the difference between having a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. I won't go into all the details here, but I'll just say there's a book by Carol Dweck, a Stanford professor, called Mindset. We use that very fundamentally in the program that help people to sort of move toward a growth mindset in their life, which gives them more options, that allows them to actually have more choice in their life, as opposed to just focusing on the things they do well.
You, at some point, whether it was another podcast or something I've read, you reference the fact that humanity has built-in rites of passage throughout the early phases of life or stages of life, and they've kind of gone away. Actually, it's interesting. My family, My brother-in-law or my sister and brother-in-law, they have 4 boys, and then I've got some cousins that have a bunch of boys, and we've just in the last 2 years have done manhood ceremonies for 2 of the 14-year-old boys when they turn 14. And it was kind of that same thing. You know, that time period is a transition time. You kind of are going from being a boy in the early phases of manhood. And we gathered around a campfire in the backyard with a bunch of older people in the family and shared insight and so on. And there, as you said, you know, we're living longer. And at 47, it could very well be that I'm, you know, just barely halfway through with my life, let alone not halfway through of my adult life. Mm-hmm. But yet there is really not, especially for somebody like me who, my dad's gone. He died when he was 62. So where do I, and this isn't even a rhetorical question because it's something that I dealt with when my wife was in her last few weeks of pregnancy, and I'm freaking out. I'm a father-to-be, and the only person that I really would feel like I could answer questions for me isn't around anymore.
Yeah.
And then it dawned on me, Chip, beyond that, I started thinking about, well, man, my dad had me when he was 30, and he died when he was 62. So, you know, I'm actually 10 years ahead of my dad in that regard, and I could very well be gone by the time my son's having children. So I actually started writing him emails about what was going on in my head for that last week or so of my wife's pregnancy to share, to hopefully someday be able to share with my son. Great if I am alive. It'll be a fun thing to go through. But if I'm not alive and I can figure out how to make sure he gets the passwords to the Gmail account and Gmail's still around, that he'll have, you know, at least some insight from his dad about what the beginning of parenthood is like. And so I really resonated, or it really resonated with me when you talked about this lack of a rite of passage for moving into the second or third phase of adulthood or fourth quarter, as you mentioned. And it's needed.
Well, it is needed because, you know, the reason rites of passage exist is because it's those times when the community needs to come together to support people through a transition. So, you know, puberty is a time that people need to be supported through transition. So what do we do? Well, we have things like communion or not communion. Yeah, communion. So what is it? Christening.
Christening,
Yeah. Or you have bar mitzvahs or bat mitzvahs, or in Latin culture you have quinceañeras for the girls. And of course we have, you know, frankly, until the word adolescence was created 115 years ago, we didn't even have junior high schools. We didn't have high schools. And so now we have junior high schools and high schools, and that helps support people through their teen or adolescent years. Similarly, when someone's going to have a wedding and you're going to connect with someone, you're going to get married, you have a wedding. So there's an element that when a society supports people through a transitional time, the person going through that transition, which can be hard, feels they're not alone. But when it comes to midlife, because midlife's actually a relatively new era in life, you know, frankly, midlife didn't exist in the year 1900 because the average longevity in the U.S. was 47.
Right.
But by the year 2000, it was 77. So the fact is, midlife's a new phenomena, and so all of these transition times I talk about are generally modern phenomena, and we have not caught up to the fact that people in midlife could use some social support. The thing is, we sort of think of adults as if they have it all together, and so like younger people, they need that support, but you get to adulthood, you don't need it anymore, and the truth is we do.
You need it more.
And if you look at suicide rates for people in midlife today, it's an epidemic. It's 50% higher than it was in the year 2000 in the United States. So as such, I really believe that we're at a stage as a species where we have to sort of say, hey, midlife is an era that we need to appreciate. And that's why the Modern Elder Academy is the first midlife wisdom school, because you've built some wisdom in your life. And part of our journey during our week together is to do an archaeological dig to figure out what it is and how do you repurpose it in the world and how do you share it with everybody else there? Because wisdom is is not taught; it's shared. And so having 8